colleagues. And sometimes we find that no matter how hard you try, there's no help. No matter how hard you cry, nobody hears you. It seems like you've been forgotten too. And when you pray, ask God for a new job, ask God for a new boss, ask God for new colleagues, a new department, it doesn't happen. I think you've been forgotten by God too. And so difficulties, afflictions that cause us may sometimes make us think that we are forgotten by people around us. Or isolation. It could be isolation, it may not be difficult, but in isolation, and you think that you're forgotten. Some of us who have gone through army, sometimes we have this kind of experience, maybe suddenly uprooted from our family, dropped in Tekong Island, you think like, wow, what am I doing at this place? I was in Thailand training. I was walking among the jungle, and one of my soldiers says, "Wow, if my mother see me in this state, she will cry because she think that the whole world, whole Singapore had forgotten him." So she was just walking aimlessly in the rain. We were a whole group of us working aimlessly because we were lost in the jungle. No, it could be desertion or it could be isolation. We think that we are deserted by people, by God, by people that we know. But at least a similar experience here. You take a look at Moses. Example, in chapter 2, verse 22, Elder Jonas had read for us, Moses called his first son, Gershom, and he says, "I've been a sojourner, I've been a wanderer in a foreign land." That's how he felt. He felt that he was isolated, he was a wanderer in a sojourner in a foreign land. He's been forgotten by people. But that's not just his feeling, because that could also be the feeling of the Israelites as well. Look at chapter 1, verse 1. It began by saying the sons of Israel were at a foreign land too, at Egypt. And in this foreign land, they faced a lot of negative experiences. And this could also make them, give them a sense that they have been deserted or they have been forgotten by God maybe. Let's take a closer look at the chapter itself, verse 1 to verse 7. I put there the title, Ended but Not the End. So it began with the chapter saying that there's 70 persons from the family of Jacob that went down to stay in Egypt. And 70 is a very small number, isn't it? You say, no, 70 is not small. Look around, this congregation is about 70, 80 people. It's about the whole church is there. You say, no, but you must understand the promise to Israel or to Jacob was that they would be a great nation, and they have only 70 people. And moreover, in verse 6, it began with a negative experience. The patriarchs are all dead, the 12 of them, and their generation, to begin with a death note for this chapter. All the forefathers were all dead, and their life all ended in Egypt. Quite a sad note. So the questions the Israelites will probably be asking is, in this foreign land, is, have we been forgotten by God? Have God forgotten us? And the answer, verse 7. And the answer is no. Verse 7 says, "And they grew exceedingly great, and they multiplied, and they were spreading out throughout the whole land, filling the whole land." Can you see? This reminds Israel of the promise of God. Where? In Genesis, because we have just covered Genesis last year, in Genesis, let me read for you Genesis chapter 12, and verse 3, and God told Abraham, this is God's promise to Abraham, 12 verse 3, it says, "I'll bless you," and, verse 2, it says, "I'll make you a great nation, and I'll bless you and make your name great so that you'll be a blessing." And this is God's promise. He said, "I'll make you a great nation." And not just to Abraham, to Isaac, also Genesis chapter 26 and verse 24. Let me read for you, 26, 24. And it says, "The Lord appeared to him, Isaac, and the same night and said, I am the God of Abraham, your father. Fear not, for I am with you, and I will bless you and multiply your offspring and for my servants Abraham's sake." You see, it is the promise that God gave to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. Genesis chapter 35 and verse 11. Let me read for you. Chapter 35, verse 11. "And God said to him," Jacob, he says, "I'm God Almighty, be fruitful and multiply. A great nation and a company of nations shall come from you, and kings shall come from your own body." Wow, this is a promise. So when they see this, coming back to Exodus chapter 1, they are reminded of God's faithfulness. They are reminded of God's faithfulness. And put it down somewhere, it says, death cannot spoil God's plan. Death cannot spoil God's plan. It could be the end of the lives of these patriarchs and their generation, but it's never the end. Death cannot spoil God's plan. Even great people, great Christian giants die. They will still not spoil God's plan, because God never forgets His people. Amen? And after that, but their experience in Egypt continue to be a very negative experience, because they have a king, a new king, Pharaoh, and he's a very insecure king. Take a look at verse 8 to verse 14. How do you know he's a very insecure king? How do you know Pharaoh is very insecure? Well, there are three instances here, there are three characteristics of an insecure person. Number one, when they are not happy when other people are doing better than them. Verse 9, these Israelites, they are way too big and they are becoming too strong. You can see, they are not happy, they cannot stand people who are more successful or more fruitful than them. This is a sign of insecurity. Second sign of insecurity, they're always thinking that people will do some harm or say something bad behind their back. Verse 10, he said, if war breaks out, these Israelites will join them. Well, where did he get these statistics from? That the Israelites will join other people and fight them. Well, insecure people always think that people are saying bad things or doing bad things behind their back. You know, the third way of seeing Pharaoh as an insecure person is that you see that the insecure person always want to be seen as a person who is in charge. Let's put taskmasters over them, verse 11. Let's tell them who is the boss here in this land of Egypt. You know, insecure people always want to let people know that they are the boss. They are the one in charge. And therefore, Pharaoh, in his own thinking, he says, let us deal shrewdly, verse 10, with these Israelites. And why? Verse 10 says, lest they continue to multiply. Let's curb them. Don't let them multiply. And you see the rest of this portion, verse 11 to verse 14, at least 8 times, the whole idea of bitter life, whole idea of ruthless treatment, whole idea of hard labor, afflictions that keep repeating itself. So when the Bible keeps repeating itself, it is telling us it is a strong emphasis. This is the life of Israel at the land of Egypt. This is a strong emphasis, and not just an emphasis, but it's also a continuous thing that's happening in the life of the Israelites. Affliction, hard labor, bitterness. You know, that's how we read the Bible. You know, when you read your own Bible in your own time, you look for repetitions like this. Because when you see repetition, we must take note. And verse 12, it gives us a strange irony. And the irony is this: the more they oppress the Israelites, the more they multiply. The more they oppress the Israelites in verse 12, and the more they multiply. This reminds the Israelites again of God's faithfulness. Affliction cannot spoil God's plan. Put down somewhere, affliction cannot spoil God's plan. Because God is always faithful to the covenant He made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. God never forgets His covenant, because God never forgets His people. Well, we see this in history. We see the oppression that the Christian experienced during the Roman Empire under Nero, under a few of the Caesars. We also see this in history, more recent history, under communism in Russia, in China, the persecution that Christians face, or persecution that Christians are facing now in Middle East or Africa. And we see Christianity grow even more in this continent. But not just numerical growth we are talking about, because the growth could also be the growth in character. When under hardship, under affliction, the Christians grow in Christ-likeness. How? When in such situation they grow in greater dependence on God, greater love for one another, or even love for those who are lost. You see their character grow. The reason? Because God is faithful. Affliction cannot spoil God's plan. They could be afflicted, but they will not be defeated. And if harsh treatment cannot work, Pharaoh is thinking, let's use some other strict method. Verse 15 to verse 22. So Pharaoh began to plot against the Israelites. And what method did he use? Verse 15 and 16. Well, I put there as secret conspiracy. Now, Pharaoh wanted to plant a mole. You know, planting a mole in a group of people. If you watch a show called Infernal Affairs, you know, those police want to catch the thief, to plant a mole inside the gang, or those secret agents like MI or in Mission Impossible, they always plant a mole inside some secret agent. And so that the attack will be easier because it comes from within. Information comes from within. You know, something like this. So who did the Pharaoh look for? Well, he looked for the midwives. And two of these midwives are named, Shifra and Puah. And it's not my wife, it's not Esther Puah. Okay, it's Egyptian. Okay, and what was the plan? The plan was when they give birth to newborn boys, secretly murder them. You know, newborn babies are very fragile, and they can be easily suffocated. So just born, they just cover them up, or dump in some water or something. Basin water, just maybe you will die. I don't know how, but this is probably Pharaoh's plan. Maybe his plan include, okay, if you do that, I'll pay you handsomely. I mean, we don't know. Or if you don't do that, I will punish you. We also don't know. Maybe it's come with handsome reward or it comes with threat. We do not know, but no matter how, this is how Infernal Affairs or how secret agent works, right? It is secretly, either they pay you or they threaten your life or your family's life. But it seems that this plan doesn't work too. Because these two Hebrew midwives didn't cooperate with Pharaoh. And the reason, verse 17, because they feared God. And verse 21, it repeats again, because they feared God. And you see, I remember I told you, once you see repetition in the Bible, it's telling us something is important. Take note of it. Because they fear God. And more than that, not just did this plan fail, this whole secret plan ended up as a satire against Pharaoh, ended up as a mockery against Pharaoh. And what kind of mockery is that? There are two aspects of it. Number one, remember verse 10, when Pharaoh says, let's deal shrewdly, cleverly with this group of people. But it seemed that thinking himself to be very clever, he was outsmarted by these two midwives. And it seems that these two midwives' lies could actually just bluff this wise Pharaoh or this smart Pharaoh. Well, don't get me wrong, the Bible is not advocating lies. It's not encouraging us to tell lies. This ethic issue we'll discuss later. We have discussed in our Friday IDG, so we're not going to cover it here. But the point here is really pointing to that Pharaoh thinking that he can be very shrewd, but he was outsmarted by two midwives. And not just that, the second mockery is quite lame. It's quite a lame reason. I think if these two midwives attend church today, they probably come to our church because it's quite lame. So they say, what reason? They say, why didn't you kill the boys? He says, wow, the Hebrew women are stronger. This is a lame reason, and such a lame reason can bluff the Pharaoh. And why lame? Remember, Pharaoh will probably be asking, why were the Hebrew women stronger? The midwife will be saying, you make them stronger because of your hard labor. You're like, shoot back at him. The secret conspiracy failed. When that failed, chapter 1, verse 22 tells us he turns to open brutality against the Israelites. But the next portion in chapter 2, you'll see that this open brutality actually worked against him as well. But we'll talk about that later in chapter 2. But in verse 20, it shows us, and now this verse again, it's a repetition. Israel multiplied and grew very strong. Can you see, this is the third time within this chapter that says Israel grew and multiplied, grew and spread out. Remember what we say, when repetition happens in the Bible, it's telling us something that's very important. Verse 7, Israel grew. Verse 12, Israel grew. Verse 20, Israel grew. Well, it's reminding us that God never forget his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, because God never forget his people. So we put here, man's cleverness cannot spoil God's plan. Death cannot spoil God's plan. Affliction cannot spoil God's plan. And man's cleverness cannot spoil God's plan. They were plotted against, but were never outwitted. Because man cannot outwit God. So at this point, you must imagine, Pharaoh must really be angry, or at least very desperate, because what he's seeing here, to him, is a national crisis. So he probably sit down with his council, come up with a policy, and imagine this announcement is made and says, the birth rate is too high, but the resources are limited. So if we continue in this way, even these store cities that we had in chapter 1, verse 11, the Pithom and Ramesses, they are not enough to feed the whole Egyptians, Egypt continent or nations. So he probably come up. So you imagine that the news now, the Home Affairs Minister announced, they said, okay, foreigners, for the next 1 year, you cannot have babies. If you don't comply, the baby boys will be thrown into Nile, the river Nile. And people are like, oh, why baby boys? How about the girls? They said, girls are allowed to live because they eat less. Except Joan. The rest are my daughter Joan. So except her, the rest are allowed to live. So this announcement probably caused a lot of fear among the Hebrews. Then people are like, oh no, how? So now it brings us to chapter 2, verse 1. In the wrong timing, when this announcement was made, 2 Levite couple got married and have a child. And if it's a girl, it's okay. But it's a boy. Oh, can you feel the tension here? You must see the tension here. And now the boy is born, and the tension built up because the mother tried to keep the child. For the first 3 months, but the tension rises up higher and higher as the baby gets bigger, gets stronger, gets louder, and you cannot hide the baby anymore. You can imagine when the baby cries, the neighbor, especially if they are Egyptians, they may complain and they may pauto, and Singaporeans will pauto and says, well, neighbor, there's some baby crying, let's call the police. And police come and voila, if it's a girl, it's okay, but if it's a boy, they will be in trouble. So the baby's mother she has to cast the baby into the river now, and she did, but with an improvised flotation. So they put a flotation. She really did what Pharaoh ordered. She cast the baby into river now, but with an improvised flotation. Now, and having his sister, the baby's sister, watch over her at a distance, and because anything could happen, even if we put the baby at the river now, anything could happen if some Egyptian soldiers passed by, or they were on their way to throw some babies in the river now, and they spotted this other baby. What would happen? Or wild animals could have just attacked and rip open the box and eat the baby. So anything could happen. But that's not the worst. The climax of the tension comes when the sister of the baby was watching at a distance. The climax of this tension comes when you see the whole entourage of Egyptians coming by the riverside. And it is Pharaoh's daughter of all people. Sidon said in his own word, Sidon's not here, he's downstairs. Sidon said in our IDG, he says, wow, you buy 4D also not so soon. Of all people, Pharaoh's daughter come with a whole entourage of Egyptians, guards and palace people, walking down now towards the box where the baby is. You can imagine the sister's face was like, oh man, that's it. And the turn of event happened when the baby cried, when the princess opened the box, and she took pity on the baby. A totally different image, very different image from what until now how it's being portrayed of the Egyptians. Right? The king is cruel, his father is cruel, he's nasty. The Egyptians were actually anti the Israelites, but the daughter took pity. The daughter took pity on this baby. And then comes the opportunistic sister and says, well, what do I get you a nanny and help you? And she then introduced the baby's mother. And she officially took care of the baby and being paid for it. What do you call this? Taking care of a baby and you get paid for it. It's called baby bonus. Oh well, now you know where our government get the idea from. Baby bonus. So Pharaoh is thinking that he's very smart, very shrewd. Remember he said he wanted to use shrewdly for the Israelites. But then he was outsmarted by 2 midwives. Then, by the baby's mother, who managed to keep the baby and then cast the baby into now with improvised probation. And by the baby's sister, who outsmarted Pharaoh with her suggestion. And now with his own daughter who defied him and adopted the Hebrew baby. In verse 10. Adopted the Hebrew baby as her own son. In the palace. So one commentator said this. Moses, from the race that Pharaoh hated, was saved from him by living in his palace. And one day will defeat him and save the race that he hated. What do you call this? The sovereignty of God. The sovereignty of God. Then, verse 11, chapter 2, 11, they bring us to some tension. The second tension, first when the baby's life was at stake. Now second tension is now the adult Moses' life was at stake again, was in danger again. And it's like one tension after another, one crisis after another. There are throughout history, there are always threats to God's plan. There are always threats to God's plan. And what's the tension? Moses grew up, fine man, 40 years, grew up in Egypt as the prince of Egypt. But now, verse 11 tells us he wanted to go out of the palace to see his people in the field. You'll be wondering, why not just stay in the palace? Why do you want to go out to the field? Why did he want to go out to a dirty field rather than remaining in the comfort of his palace where he could get whatever he wants? Money, sex, power, whatever he wants. He's a prince. But the Bible tells us in his earlier years, his nanny was his mommy, remember? The nanny was his mommy, and already through this, the mommy had already inculcated his Hebrew roots in him, letting him know that he is a Hebrew. His roots come from, and it's based on the promises that God gave to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And the Bible actually tells us from the New Testament why Moses walked out of this nice, comfortable palace into the dirty field. In the New Testament, Hebrews chapter 11, let me read for you. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 24 to 27. You can turn with me if you have, or scroll with me. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 24, it says here, but by faith, even when he, Moses, grew up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. Why? Choosing rather to be mistreated with the people of God than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. Verse 26, it says, he considered the reproach of Christ greater wealth than the treasures of Egypt, for he was looking to the reward. And by faith he left Egypt, not being afraid of the anger of the king, for he endured as seeing him who is invisible. Can you see? Why did Moses walk out of the palace? Because before him there are two very clear choices. Choosing to live in this sinful, fleeting pleasure of Egypt and the treasures of Egypt versus the disgrace and the reproach of Christ and to be with his people. Moses feared God. Hebrew tells us he was looking at the one who is invisible. Moses feared God and he chose this. He chose the reproach of Christ and to suffer with God's people rather than the fleeting pleasures of sin in Egypt and the treasures of Egypt. Can you see that? So the tension continued to build up. When he walked out of the palace, he saw the cruelty that was done to his people. This Egyptian was beating up one of his brother or one of his people. And now Moses, in this rash action, he murdered the Egyptian. Quite a contrast, isn't it? One verse before that tells us Moses' right motives. He wanted to be with these people, want to see his brothers. The next verse tells us he immediately fall into foolishness, folly. What does that teach us? One very important lesson, that we cannot do God's work our way. If you want to do God's work, that's good. But we cannot do God's work our way, because that immediately plunges him into foolishness, plunge him into folly act of committing murder. And the climax of the tension comes when the people that he was trying to save reject him and ask him, are you the priest or prince or judge for us? Are you intending to kill me? So they were actually questioning his authority. Are you a prince or judge? Second, they were questioning his motives. Are you going to kill us also? And then the climax of the tension is when he knows that his murderous act has been publicized, and Pharaoh the king heard about it and wants his life. So immediately the turn of event came, and he ran away from the land of Egypt, landed in Midian, and the prince now became a fugitive. And he was accepted by this family, and he settled down. When we come to verse 23, 25 of chapter 2, it seems that these three verses are the conclusion for chapter 1 and 2. Pharaoh died, the verse tells us, but it seems that the cruelty and the affliction continued. And the people of God continue to cry out, they continue to groan under slavery. And they show us the actions of God. 4 actions of God. God heard, God remembered, God saw, God knew. And to understand the word when God remembered here, it doesn't mean that God has forgotten, so now God needs to be reminded. Because the Israelites were crying loud enough, they go, oh yeah, correct. Remember, you are asleep there. No, it is not that. It's not that God had forgotten. To remember here really means to take up the next step to fulfill a covenant. Taking up the next step to fulfill the covenant. Because the evidence is there in chapter 1 that God has never forgotten his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The evidence is that God has never forgotten his people. The people continue to increase under persecution, increase under the death of their patriarchs, increase under this scheming, murderous act of Pharaoh. So the evidence is that God always remembered us. Just that it's only at his right timing, at God's right timing, God was going to take action. God was going to take action. Only at God's timing, at the right timing. So God preserved Moses' life twice when he was a baby, and now as an adult. And because of that, God actually will prepare this guy, Moses, to be the rescuer of Israel. Because God remembers his people. Because it only happens at God's time. At the right timing. Just that down the road, many years, at God's time, at the right timing, remember this whole incident actually repeats again. There was also a king, an insecure king, very insecure. And his name is Herod the Great, a Roman appointed king. And when he heard about the coming king for the Jewish people, he was so insecure, and he did exactly what Pharaoh did. He ordered a massacre of baby boys, 2 years and under. Remember that in the book of Matthew? Why? Why was he so afraid? Why was Herod so afraid? Because he heard that this Jesus, the king, is going to be a king for the Israelites. But this Jesus is going to be a new Moses, because it's the same incident, but a better Moses. This king that Herod was so afraid of. There are a lot of similarities between this king and Moses. Let me show you. Moses wanted to see his people. Chapter 2, verse 11 in our passage I read. And Luke tells us this Jesus visit his people. And he came to visit them. Moses left the palace to go into the dirty field. This Jesus left the glorious heaven to come to this lowly earth, to become poor and despised. Moses was rejected by his own people. They questioned his authority and questioned his motive. This Jesus was rejected also by his own people. And they too questioned Jesus' authority. Although his intention was always good and kind. And he even suffered under his own people. And he was nailed on the cross by his own people. Ultimately Moses will save the people from slavery in Egypt. But Jesus will save the people in slavery in sin and under the tyranny of Satan. But the difference between Moses and this Jesus, is that Jesus is a better Moses. Why better? Moses acted rashly and he sinned. He committed murder because he wanted to accomplish God's purpose using his own method. But this Jesus is different. Jesus wanted to accomplish God's purpose by he submitted himself under God's purpose. He did not take life like Moses. He gave his own life. This Jesus gave his own life to purchase sinners for himself. He died on the cross unjustly, but he rose victorious again. So this is a new Moses, but a better Moses in Jesus. And because of that, he alone qualifies to save us from sin and from slavery under sin and the tyranny of Satan. So the question to ask ourselves is this. If this is a better Moses, if it is a new and better Moses, will we not put our life, submit our life under this good king? Under his authority, because we know that he is a kind king, he is a good king. He gave his life to purchase us for himself. Will we still choose the fleeting pleasures of sin in this world and the treasures that are attracting us in this world? Or will we submit ourselves under this good king, Lord Jesus himself? Let us pray. We thank you, Lord, for Jesus, who is a better king, who is a better Savior. We know that no human can save us. Not our parents, not our leaders, not our government, not even ourselves. We thank you because you alone, our Lord Jesus, can save us from sin, from ourselves. We thank you for that, and we pray that all of us in this room, that God, we will put our faith and the right of our life under the authority and the loving care and the rule of our Lord Jesus.